Hey Nargol, how's it going?
I'm good. How's it going?
I'm good, working from home and just finished actually another podcast with another coworker of mine. It's all good. How's work with you? How's the quarantine situation?
Work is good. I mean, just like everybody else, trying to use Zoom to do work and stuff, trying to wrap up some projects, and yeah, that's about it. And
Nice.
yeah,
Everyone uses Zoom, by the way. Like I heard the stocks for Zoom, or yeah, they went up by a lot, and now their market or market share or market cap is like four times the whole in like airline industry combined, which is like crazy.
wow.
People are using it a lot.
Cause I mean, it's better. So many workplaces are closed, and it's like now it makes people realize, like, do you even really like have to go to work all the time? Like it's so much more efficient. It's saving like commute time, and paying for transportation. Like I get it. Sometimes you do have to be in the workplace because it's like also stimulating, but
Are you
I'm
so,
not
so
complaining.
you're happy, right? I'm personally happy, like
Yeah,
working.
I'm happy too. I mean, obviously, like if I'm trying to brainstorm new ideas or we're trying to start a new project, I obviously prefer like an in-person group dynamic thing going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
But for other, activities or just discussing like, admin matter, like with your, group and coworkers and stuff like that. I think this is like very efficient. Like I don't want to have to commute for like a 1 hour meeting.
Yeah,
So to me, it's
that's
great.
not efficient. And also you got your own time too, right? Like you take meetings, then you go for maybe a walk, like have some tea or whatever you have, and then come. Like your time is more yours, and you're able to customize your schedule a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
That's good.
agreed.
That's interesting.
Good.
So I've been reading up on a few articles that you wrote, and I saw on LinkedIn. Like this was way back
Cool.
when I first met you, and it was really interesting for me. I know you studied your master or got your master's in ecology, evolution, things like that, right? And
Yeah.
I wanted to know like how's that going? Why did you pick that? Like tell me a little more about that.
Okay, so the master's is actually I'm defending it next month,
Okay, good luck with that.
and then hopefully I'll get a master's degree, and then I'm staying in the same lab for my PhD. How I got into it, to be honest with you, I don't think there was an exact moment when I was like, oh, this is what I want to do, sort of thing. I always wanted to go into sciences, so I got an undergraduate degree in sciences in biology. And when you do biology, it's a little bit different from biomed because you get to take more courses that are not pure like cell biology or biochemistry sort of stuff, right? So I got to explore a little bit more than I would say my counterparts in biomedical sciences. And yeah, like, so people who usually go into sciences, they either want to do, not all of them, but a lot of them want to do med school or they want to do higher education because usually
Yeah.
you won't really get a job indirectly in sciences if you just have a bachelor's degree with it. So I finished a bachelor's degree and I did an honors thesis, and there came a point for me where I had to decide like what it is that I wanted to do. And I could have gone into a career with a science background but not do exactly science. But I felt like if I gave up on my dreams of being in STEM, like that was a huge deal to me. And I was like, no, I have to continue with this. And I really liked the research that I was doing as an undergrad because I started the same lab I'm in, I started with as an honors thesis student.
What was that?
And
What was that research in undergrad?
yeah, so in undergrad, I actually took a course in ecology, and I met the professor and I was like, wow, like that's what I want to be when I grow up. And I enjoyed his vibe. He was very like different from other professors that I had before. He was like the class structure was like not rigid at all. And it was this guy who showed up in shorts and he was running around
This
teaching
made it really
everybody.
fun. Like you were attracted to like the.
Yeah, he was super interactive. And I was like, wow. And like he was one of the first courses that he made us actually read relevant articles that just recently got published instead of just reading the textbook. So he was like, this is the base idea and this is what's happening right now. So I thought that was really cool. And then I asked him, I was like, hey, can I do an honors thesis in your lab? And he was like, sure. And he gave me a bunch of so camera traps are these devices that we use in the wild to record animals and stuff. and they record movement, they record a lot of different things, right? But also there's like false capture because it's like grass moving in the wind, and that's one of my issues too.
Ah,
And
okay.
he asked me to process a bunch of data sets for animals and looking at 2 different species of plants in 2 different locations in California to see which one is a better which one attracts more animals to it. So we call it facilitation. So which one is better at providing benefits to the animals, which one of the plants. So I did that for my undergrad, and then I asked him, can I do a master's in your lab? And he was really open to it. And then he was like, yeah, you have to go to the field because the data that I processed wasn't my data. So someone else gave me the camera trap stuff. So yeah, that's how I ended up
Okay.
where
And
I
you
am.
said they're called camera traps. You put them out in the wild to monitor like wildlife.
Exactly. So it helps you capture wildlife without you being present. So again, you having any effect on the behavior of the
Blind
wildlife
like
in
a
that region.
study or anything, right?
Yeah. So it's like a best way to see, natural
That makes
life
sense.
of,
That
I guess,
makes sense
animals.
because if you're there, the animals might not even come close to that like area of study that you're doing your research on.
Yeah, exactly. So what's it called? Animals in the wild are super different from the city. They're actually really scared of you more than you're scared of them.
Oh,
So
even the
yeah, so
wild ones.
it's not like here where you see a raccoon and it just stays there and chills while you're there because they're not used to it. They're
Yeah.
not used to seeing a lot of people, right? So they're like if you see like a fox, like he runs away, right? So it's one of the best ways that we can um capture wildlife, but
Interesting.
obviously it has its limitations too because it's like, oh, what's the rate of capture and how many times does an animal actually pass by, sort of thing.
Hmm.
And is it the same animal? So there's a lot of studies with like mark recaptures to make sure like is it the same animal or not, all that.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
if you want to know if it's the same animal, would you like mark the animal with like some sort of like paint or something?
Yeah, so you can do mark recapture. I personally done one before, but I did do telemetry, which is you put a radio collar on the animal and then you track it every day, so you know which animal it is,
Uh,
right? But that's for more like habitat studies and habitat fragmentation and how it impacts the animal itself. But whereas mark recaptures with the cameras, it's more like, okay, if this is the species I saw today, like I'm gonna mark it, and if it comes back, then it's the same species, so I'm not gonna count it again as
okay.
another species that I've already seen,
You're
right?
trying to gather like unique data. And it's really interesting. I didn't know that animals in the wild are more scared of humans because like when you walk downtown, these pigeons, even if you're like 10 centimeters from them, they don't even fly. Raccoons, they do not give a shit. It's interesting.
Yeah, and what's it called? There's a professor that I work with, and she actually specializes in raccoons and their behavior and stuff. And I remember one time she was telling me about how not that I guess not that they're more intelligent, like raccoons in the city, not that they're more intelligent, but they've learned more to get what they want
Yeah.
being in the city and being with people, whereas raccoons in the country are a little more like,
They
on the slower
evolved,
side.
I guess, right?
Yeah.
Like they pass this information on like generation to generation. Like
Yeah, they just learn better because having to deal with humans always being around them in an urban area.
a lot of dead ones, by the way, like
Yeah.
everywhere. That's crazy. So you did that. You got your bachelor's. You did that research in California. You said, and then now you're continuing in the same like line of study, right?
Yeah, so my lab focuses, well, not my lab, the lab that I'm a part of, focuses on drylands and arid ecosystems. So that's deserts. And that was really attractive to me because a lot of people think deserts are wastelands and we don't care about them. And they're always like, oh, tropical forests or tundra, or well, not tundra, but like forests in the northern region. They're like, oh, let's focus on that. But I really like that idea because deserts are actually really cool and they're super biodiverse and there's a lot of interactions that are happening that you don't necessarily see.
Hmm.
And also, it's a super, super harsh environment, right? You've got drought, you've got aridity, you've got solar radiation, at its peak in the summertime during the day. So I wanted to do that sort of research. So I wanted to stay in that lab. And my lab is a little different in a sense that my professor, he's super open to people exploring their ideas as long as you're still looking at positive interactions in a desert ecosystem. So
What do you mean
it's
by
not like,
what do you mean by positive interactions?
so ecology is actually the study of interactions between abiotic, biotic, all the different scenarios. So when you say positive interactions, I'm talking about facilitation. It's when an animal helps another animal. That can be in a symbiosis kind of way, like both of them help each other, or just one of them benefits the other one and the other one doesn't harm the other one, right? So for a very long time, competition was actually one of the most favorite subjects of the literature. And then the switch happened in 1994 to facilitation with a paper about how as abiotic stress, so sunlight, temperature, whatever, increases, actually, plants and animals start helping each other to survive rather than competing with each other.
Okay. So as the conditions in the desert get harsher, then
Yeah.
animals or the environment within that kind of, or the animals within that environment start helping each other more.
Yeah, so animal-animal interaction, that's common, but most importantly, there's something called foundational plant species. So foundational plant species are actually species that are abundant and common within a desert ecosystem or any ecosystem really, but they have a very important value for the stability of what's going on in that ecosystem because they provide a lot of benefits to either the same taxa or other taxa, right? So that could be trapping nutrients, providing a canopy where they can thermoregulate, trapping seeds, providing a place for reproduction, all these stuff, right? So in deserts, what I'm particularly more interested in is more like animal plant kind of interactions, right? And what happens between that interaction as you add a lot of abiotic stress to that ecosystem.
Right. So more temperature, more sunlight, just harsher conditions.
Exactly, yeah. So what happens when temperature goes higher? What happens when solar radiation increases, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's like the next part of what I'm trying to do.
So like if you haven't got to that, by the way, I'm not sure if you have, but what does happen? You said obviously like let's say animal to animal, they start helping each other out. So the plants would help the animals out as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's actually the main focus of my study. So basically, what I chose, so there's a lot of things that can happen, like that foundational plant species can do for other taxa and the same taxa. So as I said, seed trapping, abiotic stress amelioration. So that's my focus. So
Okay, okay.
I'm focusing on the canopy of the plant and how that shading effect and that cooling effect can be beneficial for animals that want to thermoregulate in that environment, right?
Okay.
So for my master's degree, what I'm trying to compare is how well do artificial shelters that I design and built compare to the foundational species that I work with, which is actually called Ephedra californica, or commonly known as Mormon tea. That's the shrub that I focus on. So I want to see how that thermal
Write that
environment,
down. Mormon tea.
Mormon tea, it's a lot of people actually drink it because it has hallucinogenic, how do you say that word again?
Hallucinogenic, something like
Hallucinogenic
that.
properties, yeah.
Ah, interesting. Okay,
But
more
apparently it tastes really bad. So
as as they do. So artificial, sorry, you used a lot of, so I get the gist of what you're talking about for
yeah.
sure, and I'm just going to try to understand more. You said that right now you're trying to create that artificial effect that these abiotic conditions already create, like out in the desert, but you're trying to create artificial shelters now.
So yeah, so I know for sure because of other people's research and the people that have been in my lab previously that the canopy of a shrub is useful because it decreases abiotic stress.
Yeah.
So it's a colder, more moist, what's it called, less direct solar radiation kind of environment. Like we know that already. I'm sure about that. I wanted to think about, okay, desertification and global warming is a real thing. You cannot just rely on management and conservation practices to be like, okay, we're going to try to make sure all the shrubs in the region are safe, right? because I work in regions that are part of the what do you call it, the California oil exploration area. So there's a lot of oil exploration that's going on in that region. There's a lot of urbanization, obviously, like everywhere in the world, because there's a lot of people. So it's just simply unrealistic for us to be like, okay, so they're just going to save all the shrubs, right? And also, natural disasters like wildfires, sea level rise, hurricanes, things like that are becoming more common. So even if you wanted to, you can't really control for, you know, a fire, like forest fire happening, or a fire happening in the desert, right? So my thing is, what can we do while, you know, if a disturbance happens, right? How can we go about creating that environment for animals, right? That they have the ability to still thrive and, you know, survive and thrive while new shrubs are grown, right? So now I'm testing UV permeable shelters that I like designed and everything. They're made with like shade cloths, like sometimes gardeners use them, that come in different permeabilities, right? So, you know, if you want 50% blockage, 90% blockage, right? So I'm testing those, like lower end, higher end, middle end, see which one works better. And yeah, like I'm comparing those to shrubs to see which one is the best.
Interesting. Okay, and all these UV permeable shelters, you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so these UV permeable shelters, you're designing them. Obviously, like there's a lot of different factors that you're taking into account, and then what you're trying to do is see which of these shelters best imitate like a natural shrub.
Shrub, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So I want to see which one is more which one emulates a shrub the best, with like, because that's what you want, right? You want the animals to feel the natural environment, the natural vegetation, right?
I
So
think
that's what I'm
that
trying to look at.
this is really important because, like, as we move forward, at least with the current pace that we're going, wildlife is in more and more danger, right? Over.
Yeah, for sure. And also human wildlife conflicts are becoming more and more prevalent, right? As I talked about, you know, oil in California, urbanization, all of that stuff. We're taking over more and more land. There's wildlife. There's going to be more humans coming in contact with the wildlife. And to me, it's like, you know, I like science for the sake of science and just knowing what's going on, but it's really nice to also be able to think about practical ways that you can help nature being, you know, stasis,
Yeah,
host stasis.
in stasis.
Yeah, like the state of, you know, overall well-being.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
interesting. You're right. Like when you have that knowledge or that theory, there is a certain like satisfaction to actually implementing those and being able to like see the birth of like what, like the results, right? Like seeing the result of all the knowledge they accumulated together to figure out like how you can actually save or help them survive or thrive, or like whatever the result is going to be. So are you going down the same path like for your PhD as well, but on a more complex scale, or are you looking to like change directions?
Yeah, so I'm hoping to sort of use some of the data that I have for my master's for my PhD as well. So right now I know that shelters work, and I know which shape and which permeability base emulates a shrub canopy. But what I want to know is that, like, yes, we know that animals interact with shrubs, but are they going to interact with my shelter? You know,
Okay.
that's something that I want to know, right? So I would love to go and set up a ton of shelters, which is going to take a bit of time, and also a ton of hammer traps, and see if they interact with it. And I wanted to see if that interaction is different from how much they interact with a natural shrub versus how much they interact with my artificial canopies, right?
Interesting. Okay, so when you say shelters, it constantly reminds me of like homeless shelters and how like you're creating this. Like I know Connie is making like a dome-shaped shelter out in the middle of the desert for like homeless people, and like the shape and everything is really interesting. What does this really look like? Like is this a small shelter, or is it like a large thing that covers a lot of area? Like what does it really look like?
No, so you don't want it to be, actually, one of the things that we tried is we don't want it to be too big. We want it to be as close in size and I guess canopy volume to a shrub's canopy volume and size, right? So I would say my shelters are about, maybe if they're like square, they're like a meter by meter sort of thing,
Oh,
right?
okay. That kind of size.
Yeah, so I have two shapes, square and triangle. So yeah, like I try my best to make sure they're similar to a size of a shrub, because otherwise that becomes a confounding variable in what you're trying to do, right?
That's true. That's true. So other than that, what other factors do you take into account? Like I know you said the shape is important, the UV permeability is important. What else is there that you take into account when you're designing shelters like that?
I guess so far it's been, yeah, just like how um it affects permeability. And also, so I was lucky because UV shade cloth shelter, like sorry, shade cloths, actually have like these holes in them that it's kind of like analogous to branching in an actual shrub, right?
Oh, okay.
So that's really nice because it means that, it kind of also mimics not just how much light gets in, but sort of the regime that the light gets in to your under your canopy, right? So that was something that important to me. Also something that, air could go through and rain could go through, because
Hmm.
I don't want, because then those would be other variables, right? Because there's shelters out there, like they're called drought nets, that control for rain, but
Oh,
that's a completely different experiment. There is also shelters they actually started in the Arctic. They're called, uh, the short form, the abbreviation is actually OTC,
geez.
open top chambers. That's it. Open top chambers. And they're actually used to increase temperature for alpine plants. So,
Because they're down in like somewhere very,
yeah,
very cold, so they need the opposite effect there. Okay.
exactly. So they're used to actually increase the temperature and I guess maybe the humidity
Hmm.
um, within that given environment. But mine are trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to decrease, climatic stress, right?
That is really interesting. All of these things you're saying, I wonder if at some point we're going to need to create artificial shelters for humans actually from like global warming effects as well, or like from pollution or other sorts of natural disasters that would happen.
Yeah. So I don't know. Global warming is a very it's a complex area of science, because it's like, first of all, it's not like everywhere is going to get warmer, right? You're just going to get a lot of extreme events and more frequent extreme events, right? So that's how climate change manifests itself, right? So when I talk to people and they're like, "Oh, it's not getting warmer," and I'm like, "But you're getting more frequent, I guess hailstorms, snowstorms, whatever, right?" Climate change is going to be, to a certain extent, advantageous for certain regions, because you're going to be able to grow more,
Hmm.
so economically speaking for farmers. But it's also going to be super devastating for a lot of regions, because there's going to be a lot of floods, there's going to be sea level rise. Like California, for like, I was reading their assessment from, I think, last year. They're for sure going to have a lot of sea level rise by the year I don't know, what
Sorry,
was it,
a lot of
2300,
a lot of what?
2300. A lot of sea level rise.
Oh, sea level rise. Okay.
See, yeah, so it's like beneficial in certain regions, but not beneficial in other regions.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
also at the same time, the issue with climate change when you're talking about wildlife is that you're pushing distribution and boundaries of a lot of animals, right?
Hmm.
So it's like, how far north, or how far up in elevation is an animal gonna go before it just becomes like extinct,
Extinct.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I
So
I was reading this thing on one of your articles that you shared as well, that this leopard, I don't know what species of leopard
oh,
it
leopard lizard. Oh, it's a lizard. It's really
oh,
cute.
it's
It's an
leopard lizard.
endangered species. Yeah, federally listed in the US.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
those types of species are obviously endangered because of, let's say, factors like climate change. And to your point, I mean, I didn't personally know this, that climate change doesn't necessarily create rise in temperature all the time, but more like frequent natural disasters in certain areas of the world, right?
Yeah. So when we're discussing this, like they always like um release like worldwide assessments or whatever, and they're like under like business as usual model where we can get like a 2 degrees Celsius increase, right? And you're like, that's nothing. But if you think about it globally, that makes a
Exponentially affect
huge difference in different regions.
Yeah, interesting. So
Yeah.
2 degrees Celsius might not affect someone living in the city, but then it has extreme and exponential effects as we move forward in certain areas.
Yeah, not even in the city, like just like 2 degrees might not have a huge like effect if you live in Toronto and it's cold a lot of times. You're like, if you're a farmer in Southern Ontario, you're probably like, yay, more growing season for me,
Yeah.
But in certain areas in like the Mediterranean, like of south of I guess Portugal or Spain, you're gonna get really, really hot
Mhm.
weather. And that like climate change has its effect on wildlife, but it also has its effect on people. There's going to be more days and more hours that you have to spend inside under the AC. You can't go outside, right? There's old people are really, they're a vulnerable demographic in the population when it comes to heat strokes and things like that, right? So
And do you know any ways that, right now, obviously, other than reducing carbon dioxide or emissions like that, do you know any other way that they're doing research or studying to reduce these effects? Any sort of artificial ways to sway these numbers or climate change and reverse it?
I mean, I'm sure there's people always thinking about artificial ways to, fix something, especially humans are always doing that. I'm not really familiar with the literature in that area. I think it's more like engineering aspects of things.
Mhm.
I'm more familiar with, climate modeling and climate envelope models and things like that because it's, closer to my
Yeah, yeah.
own field. But, overall, like at the end of the day, a lot of the articles that I'm reading and stuff, they're talking about, um, less production of, greenhouse gas emissions and stuff, especially from factories and stuff, through a circular economy. Like, I think that's a huge thing because if you have a circular economy, there's a lot of global anthropogenic change issues that you're trying to prevent, for example, plastics in the ocean, because that's like it's climate change and plastics in the ocean, like microplastics, that's like huge, you know um
So
so yeah, I would say more.
what exactly is circular economy, by the way? Does that mean like production and then just going through that cycle of production, waste, recycling, and then constantly?
Yeah, like being very, very efficient in recycling. Um, things like, slowing out on like things like fast fashion, being able to pass on clothes to each other as much as possible, right? Um, these are things
Interesting.
that
I did
people are
see like
thinking.
fashion also has is a very big contributor to like climate change.
Yeah, climate change, fast fashion is a huge contributor to plastics in the ocean too. I actually went to a talk by a professor at U of T who specializes in microplastics in the ocean. And I did not know that the fibers in our clothes are releasing plastic. I did not know that us washing our clothes in the laundry and then the water going into the water systems and the hydro systems and everything, it's releasing microplastics in the ocean.
Seriously, I did not know.
Yeah, like there's someone is doing some research, I forgot her name or his name, that they put like some sort of a filter in their laundry, and they monitor like in like a bunch of households in a given area in their laundries, and they monitored microplastic levels in like the water systems, and like it dropped by you know X factor. Like that's crazy. Like that's something we can all do. For me to put a filter in my
Yeah,
laundry
it's
takes
such a
like two
simple
seconds.
solution, right?
Yeah. And what else? Like, yeah, there's just so many things I was reading about. It's like the microplastics is like the new acid rain. Like it's ending up in air because once water is evaporating, it's like going everywhere, right? It's like
Yeah.
clouds. It's like ending up in areas that like no human has ever been. But there's microplastics now in those areas.
all from one
right?
simple thing that you could have avoided if you knew about it.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, that's my thing. It's like use glass. Stop using plastic.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good solution. So obviously, like you're involved in a lot of this work, and really interested to know how um, recent trends and obviously future trends like artificial intelligence, blockchain, obviously like big data is we need data everywhere and it's becoming more and more anyways. But how are these recent trends that are becoming more popular affecting your line of work or helping you tackle some of these problems?
Yeah, I think you and I talked about this. So, Microsoft is actually doing this huge project. It's called Microsoft AI for Earth Sciences or whatever. And they're asking a lot of different, laboratories and individuals who collect wildlife photo and camera trap photos, and they've already processed them. They actually are asking for that. So they actually reached out to my lab, and my professor was like, you have a lot of data if you want to talk to them about it and send it to them. So
Mhm.
I did my data to them, and they have a lot of people working to get all of that data into the same format. So like from, I guess, hundreds of labs across like the US, Canada, whatever, Europe, which is great because it means they're going to have a huge database, first of all, and they're sharing all this data. It's going to be online. So, open science, which is another thing I'm really big on. You should share your data. You shouldn't hoard your data. Like, it's great. Like, it's a collaborative effort between everybody in the world. So you should be open about it. But yeah, they're sharing this data and they're using that. So people like, I guess engineers, software engineers, people in computer sciences and stuff who are working with Microsoft are trying to use that data for artificial intelligence. So what that means for like a field like mine is like, you know, me going and camera trapping and not having to process those cam traps, like that's huge. Sorry, my phone just rang. Um, that's huge, right? Like it saves me like 6 months of work for me to process 400,000 images, like, usually takes, 5 to 6 months, right? So if I don't have to do that, that's crazy. Also, if I have like access all the time, like if there's like some sort of a satellite imagery system that's connected to AI, that, then I can just pull the data on my computer,
Mhm.
life, life, what's it called? Real lifetime, right? Like right now in California, that's big, like I don't have to go out there. Because people think camera traps are easy because you just like, oh, you just leave them in the desert. But it's like, no, like you got to go change the batteries, you got to go change the SD cards. Like the maintenance takes so much work. And
Right.
it's like, if we could skip that space or that step and get to what we want, the kind of data that we want faster, then it's like getting published faster, but sharing that knowledge, more importantly, faster, and getting to the next part of your experiments faster.
Of course,
So
no, that's really cool. Data sharing. So to your point, if people are all sharing the results of their experiments or data collection and data gathering processes and sharing it with others, and then someone like a big organization like Microsoft is taking all of this and making sure the data is consistent
yeah,
and making sure the data is clean for your analysis, for example, then that helps a lot of researchers. I guess that in and of itself accelerates that research process that happens, and you can get to know results and insights a lot faster too, right?
for sure. Yeah, and that means you can get to practical solutions, conservation, restoration sort of strategies a lot faster, right? You could save the planet faster, I guess, or like, find practical solutions faster. So it would be really beneficial to at least
it,
my field.
it does seem like a lot of not a lot of people, I don't know the stats on this, but maybe people look at this as a zero sum game. Oh, it's my data, I don't want to share it and I'm just gonna like hoard all of it for myself. But I mean, contrary to that, it's like a positive sum game where the more you share, the more you gain from it as well, right? So that's cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's like my professor is really big on open science and doing open science, and I think he's trying to train students that are also big on open science and that sort of a culture because it's important. And I think a lot of, you know, um young graduate students and young professors are also in that sort of, they have that same mindset about open science. Like the more you hoard your data, I feel like it's less of a collaborative effort. So it's like you're gonna, like people are not going to give you feedback on, you know, what tools you're using to statistically analyze your stuff, what tools you're using to, you know, have backup or whatever. Things like github is huge. Like when you share your data or you have questions, people always help you, people that have experience with it. So I just think overall it's better science. And you have people that criticize parts of your work, which is great. They're like, you know, do
Yeah.
you really think that this is how it's supposed to be? Yeah, like I think it's great. They give you a new perspective on things. So
That's really interesting. You have a lot of interesting things that you're researching on, and obviously I don't have that technical knowledge to like ask all of the right questions, but it does seem like you're in on something, and you and your colleagues and everyone else that's working in that field, because at the end of the day there's a lot of people that are just focusing on, let's say for myself, I'm focused on management consulting, helping businesses out, being on different projects and trying to, let's say, help businesses grow, expand, save money, reduce costs, etc. But then on the other end, there's so many things happening in the world, like so many negative, obviously positive events too, but negative events happening in the world. And there are people who are actually researching these sorts of activities to help reverse or at least like improve the situation. So really like kudos to you. It's just really interesting. And
thank you.
do you know anything about like blockchain as well and how that could potentially be used in this field? Because I know blockchain is all about decentralization and establishing trust within the network or whatever the transaction or information being exchanged. But how is it helping in this specific context, or how does it help if it does?
Um, blockchain is not something I know a lot about, but you know, from what you just said, like I guess safe transfer, like that could apply to your data for sure. I think the way you change data, the way you know, transfer data and stuff like that, and you know, maybe not having to all like having like an actual database sort of thing instead of having to like, you know, send it on like an SD card or send it on a drive or things like that, like having to carry drives with yourself all the way to the field station. I guess that it would make our life easier in that
Yeah,
aspect.
that makes sense. I guess you can also establish a lot more trust in the information because there are multiple chains and multiple different entities validating like or confirming the validity of the information being transferred, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess it would be really helpful to open science, people who want to do open science. I
Hmm.
think for sure.
Okay, no, that's cool. I know we're at the 40-minute mark, so if you have anything that you wanna talk about, like closing lines or whatever, I don't know if you have anything else to talk
And
about.
if I haven't, no, I don't. I think you've covered a lot of things that I wanted to talk about, and I thought it would be interesting to talk about. And nothing. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast. Really
It's
cool.
it's amazing. It's really good to have you. Really good talking to you. Like I'm always interested in these sorts of things. Like genuinely, I really want to know more. So thanks for coming on and appreciate it.
No problem. And I think what you're doing is great, and you're bringing people from so many different areas and different fields, and it's good to get their perspective on different things and maybe the same things as well. So thanks for having me.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you. Take care.